Hi everyone, this is Caitlin from grassfedgirl.com, and I'm here with Diana Rodgers Rd. She is an old friend we met in 2009, I think, at Ancestral Health Symposium. And so we go way back, and I'm just so excited because she's here to talk about her new book. It's called Sacred Cow. I have the Kindle version here, and it is really amazing, very on topical, very on point for what we're dealing with these days with all of the propaganda in the media and everything. So this is coming out soon, right?
Yes, it comes out July 14th.
Yeah, so she wrote it with Robb Wolf. I mean, if anybody's ever heard of him, I don't know. But I actually saw Robb Wolf also in 2000, probably 2009, also in Chico doing a talk. And so these two have a lot to share with us. And I mean, he's not going to be here today, but Diana's here and she's going to tell us everything about her new book. And I just love that they wrote this book together. And I just think it's so important that we dispel some of the myths that are going on in the mainstream media. And, you know, a lot of it's vegan propaganda and on and on. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, stay tuned. And Diana's going to talk about all these things that you hear and maybe your mom tells you or your grandma and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So welcome, Diana. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I actually met Robb at that same conference that I met you at in LA in 2009 or 10 or whenever that was. So that was a pivotal conference. That was really the first one of any of this. So that's where I met Michelle Tam, who's now one of my best friends. And yeah, really. So I've been thinking about writing this book for a really long time. And Robb is a perfect partner because he also is really interested in sustainability and kind of like, once you've healed yourself, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know, we're here once. If you want to leave a legacy, make the world a better place, you know, this is sort of our big manifesto. So I live on an organic farm. I've lived for 18 years on different farms. And I really noticed that most of the people that are talking about, you know, healthy eating and sustainability tend to talk about less meat, vegan, vegetarian. And that's just really not anywhere how I think the conversation needs to be going. And so in Sacred Cow, first of all, we talk about why is meat the most polarizing topic? Why has it become the scapegoat for our fears about the environment and our health? And really, a lot of it comes down to our fear of death and being really uncomfortable with death. It used to be something that we experienced on a regular basis and was a normal part of living, and wasn't like the scary end. It was just a piece of the circle of life. And now that we, you know, largely don't live on farms and we live in more urban areas, and even, you know, we don't watch grandma die anymore. That happens at a nursing home. We're just not seeing death on a regular basis. And we've outsourced all of it, including human death. And what's happened in that process is the industrial food system has sort of been able to do whatever they want to do in order for the most efficient methods. And unfortunately, animals are living biological beings and really don't fit that model of, you know, bigger, faster, cheaper. And so the industrial food system is a horrible mess, and we definitely acknowledge that. I'm on the board of Animal Welfare Approved. I definitely am an advocate for better animal treatment. We raise animals here on our farm, and but primarily it's an organic vegetable farm. And we started as a vegetable farm, but realized that in order to have good fertility on the soil, we actually had to have animals as part of our practice. So you really just can't have an only vegetable farm without any animal inputs, whether that's manure or, you know, other organic certified fertilizers, might be blood meal or feather meal, you know, all these animal parts, because that's just what happens in nature. It's, you know, birth, life, death, decomposition actually fosters new life. And so as we were raising the animals, we just realized this, with your big zucchinis at the end, everyone who has a garden ends up with these zucchini bats. You can either let those compost and, break down and emit greenhouse gases just through their breakdown, or you can feed them to a chicken who can then concentrate those nutrients and provide eggs. What do you do with that chicken at the end of its life? You can either compost it and let the raccoons get to it, or you can eat that and actually have really amazing protein. Humans are omnivores, and we thrive on animal products. And not everyone has the privilege to be able to push away nutrient dense food. And I think that to even be able to have this conversation, we have to acknowledge that we're sitting in a position of privilege, right? To be able to debate whether or not we should even, think of the most nutrient dense food since the beginning of time to humans as something that maybe we shouldn't eat, right? You have to be well fed. You have to have all your basic needs met in there and then some in order to be talking about that. And so that's really the beginning of the book, is like, how did this all happen and why are we here debating this?
That's such good questions. Now, you have a personal connection to all this when you had some health struggles, and what led you to get so interested in this kind of topic?
Yeah. So I didn't find out until I was 26 that the reason why I was so sick ever since I was a kid was because of undiagnosed celiac disease. I went gluten-free when I was 26, and it did cure a lot of my digestive problems, but not all of them. And I'm still having major blood sugar roller coaster issues. And I'm actually recalling the conversation that I had with you, like talking about this way back. And so it really wasn't until I was able to kind of liberate myself from processed foods and really embraced animal proteins and animal fats that I was able to go from breakfast to lunch without needing a snack, be able to skip lunch sometimes and be okay, not have tunnel vision and, rage if I didn't have my granola bars on me, my gluten-free granola bars. And so that really led me down the nutrition path. And again, I started my education in nutrition kind of later in my life when my kids were little. And at the time, I was really just focused on nutrition, just whole foods nutrition. The name of my vlog wasn't Sustainable Dish at the time. It was Radiance Nutrition. But I just noticed so many people were so interested in my farm life and in raising animals and what it was like and everything that I decided to blend the two together.
And you wrote 2 other books or 3 other books?
I have Paleo Lunches and Breakfast on the Go, which is a cookbook that came out kind of early in the Paleo cookbook cycle. And then Homegrown Paleo, which is actually a homesteading book and sort of seasonal cookbook too. That's
amazing. I mean, I know the homesteading one is very beautiful for sure.
Thank you.
Well, just if you're interested in, mixing the lifestyle of the farm and the, natural foods and fermentation and all that kind of stuff, it's a really pretty one. So what do you think about, the carnivore movement has come on really strong in the last couple of years, or 1 year, 2 years, very, very fast. What do you think about that and how, it impacts the meat industry and idea about being a vegan and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I think that people should have the right to choose whatever diet works for them. So I have no problem if someone, chooses to be vegan for whatever reason they want, or paleo or standard American diet. I just hope that people do the right research and find what works best for them. And, certainly the carnivore diet seems to be really helpful for a lot of people, especially what I'm seeing with, digestive issues and autoimmune issues. It seems to be really helpful when it makes sense to just pull out any potentially offensive, reactive ingredients and just focus on what you digest best. I definitely personally probably eat a lot more animal products than a typical person because years and years of undiagnosed celiac is a number on your intestines, and I just don't digest plants particularly well. But my kids and my husband do. They had just stronger constitutions, and they didn't have all the digestive problems that I had growing up. And so I just think that there's a big spectrum of people. Some have to be totally carnivore. Most people are somewhere in the middle. And then, some people seem to be kind of okay on a vegan diet, but most people after a period of time do tend to see their health decline. Again, I think I can understand why someone would ethically decide, I don't want any part of all of that. But again, I think it's an unnatural fear of death that's really driving that, and not understanding the crucial benefits that animal products have to the human body nutritionally, but also to our landscapes in a healthy, sustainable food system. And also, once you dive more into the ethics with a better understanding of nutrition and environment, then the ethical argument actually ends up looking more like a system without animals actually does more harm than good.
So every week we're seeing headlines and, meat was going to kill you, and this new eggs are going to kill you, whatever. So what is the problem with a lot of that studies and the information that we see in the headlines?
Yeah. Well, nutritionally, with the criticisms against meat, what those are based on are observational studies. So there's never been a randomized controlled trial proving that meat causes cancer or heart disease or diabetes. These studies are very large. They're population based, and they're looking at 100,000 omnivores versus vegetarians, and then trying to draw some conclusion that it must be the meat that's driving colon cancer or all these things. They have found a slightly more robust evidence about colon cancer in processed meats, but it's still statistically, to me, pretty insignificant. So you have to understand that like when the media reports a 20% increase in colon cancer risk when you eat processed meats. First of all, that's if you eat 5 slices of bacon every single day for the whole rest of your life, which most people aren't doing. But also, the general population's risk of colon cancer is about 5%. And in this study, it showed that your chance of getting colon cancer went up to 6% at the whole population if you were to eat 5 slices of bacon every single day. So we have to look at the absolute risk. So 5% to 6% versus the increase is 20%. So like with cigarette smoking, your chance of getting multiple different types of cancer goes up 300%.
Wow.
That's a big difference. 30 times the difference. So we don't even have a 2 times the difference with red meat or processed meats and colon cancer. So there definitely are, things that appear to give us cancer, but we have to be looking at the relative risk, because in the same categories as probably cause cancer, like red meat, we have air and sunlight, and a lot of things again it's just really, cancer takes a long time to develop. It's really difficult to do nutrition research because they're often based on self-reported nutrition data. So, how many burgers did I eat in the last 3 months? I don't know. And people are much more likely to forget that they also had extra large fries and a 72-ounce Coke with that. They're much less likely to report that they smoke and drink. They're much more likely to exaggerate how much they exercise. So there's just all these factors that show that self-reported data when it comes to nutrition surveys is just unreliable.
Yeah, I wish that would be underneath the headline. Like, this is from a questionnaire, it's like, no.
And they're not even daily questionnaires. Like, people can't keep up with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's so ridiculous. And you can't put people into isolation in order to do a correct study. I mean, most people aren't going to sign up for that, right?
Right. I mean, there are some nutrition studies that they do in metabolic wards, but we're looking at something like cancer that takes years and years and years to develop. It's impossible to be able to pinpoint one food. I mean, the proper way to do it would be to lock people up for their pretty much whole life, and take the exact same diet for one population versus the other, just with the exclusion of meat or the addition of meat in the other group, and then observe the results. And that's the only way you'd actually be able to prove that. And when we're looking at a product that humans have eaten for millions of years, I think it's far more likely that it's something in our modern lifestyle and processed foods that have us in this huge mess, and not meat, which is, again, something that humans have eaten for a very, very, very long time.
And I mean, it makes so much sense to me, but I have a lot of aunts and grandmas. I'm not grandmas, but my grandma grew up on a farm, and she was always killing stuff right and left. So for her, she would never think of not eating meat, because to her that's just normal. But I have some aunts and stuff that have had cancer, and they're very scared of meat because they got so scared after their getting over it. And you just can't talk to them. They're just like, talk to the hands. And it gets really emotional.
Yeah, I mean, people definitely, what they eat becomes the way of life for them. And so it does become, unfortunately, a really emotional conversation instead of one that's just based on logic.
Yeah. So what is the idea with, I mean, you have some interesting thoughts on like Meatless Mondays and how people are taking that over from schools and nursing homes and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I should mention that there's a film component to this as well. And at the moment, I'm trying to figure out, I think I'm going to be able to do this for anyone who pre-orders the book. They'll be able to get a preview link of the film, a direct preview link. I'm right in the middle of trying to figure that out, but I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. We also have videos, interviews, 4.5 hours of them that didn't make it into the film that we are giving out for sure with anyone who pre-orders the book. But we visit with a professor at the University of Florida who works for a program called Feed the Future. And he works a lot with folks in Rwanda who probably don't have doctors for hundreds of thousands of miles, yet alone definitely no CVS's or Walgreens to get their B12 supplements and their iron tablets and all those things. And yeah, and the reality is that the only studies that have been done on malnourished kids looking at meat versus less meat have shown that the meat supplement actually increases their academic performance, their physical performance, and their behavioral performance. So we only have one trial that looks at that. And so you could say, okay, well, maybe that works in parts of Africa. But when we're looking at the New York City public school system, where 70% of those kids are either homeless or low income, pulling meat out of their diet, even one day a week, when that might be the only meal they get all day or the best meal they get all day, there's simply no evidence to show that that's going to benefit them in any way. So this is based on zero evidence that, of course, you could say, well, but it's just, what's wrong with giving them fruits and vegetables one day a week, right? Like, what's wrong with you? You're such a fanatic, that, you can't have meat with every meal. But these Meatless Monday lunches are not, fresh fruits and vegetables and beautiful, bountiful salads. When you look at what they are, it's like a grilled cheese, some black beans, and, I mean, that's not, your perfect plant-based meal. And again, kids might not be able to afford meat, and they need that iron. Their kids are not likely to eat enough spinach in order to get their iron requirement for the day. But just a little bit of meat can actually make a massive difference. Even giving kids, an egg or two a day, if they don't have other protein, makes a massive difference. And so from a social justice perspective and again, a privilege perspective, I actually think that pulling meat away from kids is one of the worst things we can be doing.
Absolutely. And any institution like a prison or a subsidized nursing home or anything like that, everyone needs the protein as much as they can.
Yeah, and definitely I've noticed too, there's an organization called Healthcare Without Harm that I watched a presentation not too long ago where they were proudly showing how much they've reduced the meat in these hospital lunches and dinners. And the problem is when you're in a hospital, your protein needs actually go way up. And burn victims need like 3 to 4 times the protein that a regular person needs in order to heal properly. You're really not going to be able to do that with tofu and chickpeas. People need to have meat, and to do no harm nutritionally needs to be the number one concern in hospitals. And so just because pulling meat away because of industrial farming is like telling people they shouldn't wear clothes because of sweatshops. Clearly there's a problem with the system, but reducing or eliminating meat is not going to fix the system. We need a better system.
Absolutely. So what is your take on, especially the carnivore movement, which is the first time I've seen it, is there's kind of a vitriol about the grass-fed beef, and it's like, well, it doesn't taste as good, and we don't really think it's much different. So I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, well, so as a nutritionist, I think ethically it's pretty hard to tell people to only eat grass-fed meat or don't eat any meat, right? Just like a doctor would never say only eat organic vegetables or don't eat vegetables. That would be unethical. And I think that people should just buy the best meat they can afford from a nutrition standpoint. I did Robb and I both combed through the evidence that we could find on, glyphosate residue, antibiotic residue, any kind of bacterial residue, the omega-3s, all of that. And we really couldn't find a significant difference between, a typical grass-fed steak versus a feedlot finished steak. And that's largely because it's digested by their rumen. And so it's really these bacteria that are sort of translating all the nutrients to the cow. There is a slight difference in omega-3s in some studies, but not in all. But beef is not a major source of omega-3s to begin with. And so saying there's twice as many omega-3s in this grass-fed steak is like saying 2 pennies is twice as much money as 1 penny. And it's like, well, there's not that much money in 2 pennies anyway. But environmentally and ethically, I do think that grass-fed beef is significantly better. And so it's a complicated topic. And nutritionally, buy the best meat you can afford. I think if you're in a typical grocery store and you don't have access to grass-fed beef, it's feedlot finished beef is still a better choice than industrial raised chicken or pork, because those animals are 100% inside their entire life and eating only grain. Feedlot finished cattle are largely spend most of their life on grass. And even when they're finished on a feedlot, they're not in a cage. They're largely upcycling nutrients over their entire life. They're getting, about 10 to 12% of their diet is actually grain. Most of their diet is grass and corn stalks and things like that. But of course, well-managed grass-fed cattle are the best. Those are the ones that are moved in a regular manner, not just on one piece of grass for the entire season. They're moved frequently, and that allows for the grass to get a rest, for the cows to be constantly accessing fresh new grass, and that's how carbon can get sequestered and how the land can really heal.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. I think that's something most people don't know about, is how the topsoil can be improved with the right kind of agriculture and grazing.
Yeah. So when you look at all of our agricultural land in the world, about 3/4 of that, 2/3 to 3/4, is really only suited to grazing because it's either too hilly or too rocky or too brittle. So the actual amount of land that we can crop to grow corn or wheat or soy is actually about 1/3 or less. So if we were to remove animals from our food system, we would effectively not utilize about 3/4 of the land that we have access to in order to produce food. And there's a lot of people in the world that that's all they can produce. Like if you think of Mongolia and the herding populations there, they can't, the land doesn't support, tofu farms, but it does support grazing animals. And we also have to think about women's rights too, because in many places, women can't own title to land, but they can own livestock. And we know that when women have access to livestock, that greatly improves their life, their financial stability, and the nutrition of the entire household. And so remind me what the question was again.
Just I think there's a big problem with the topsoil.
Oh, right.
Away and that kind of thing.
Right. I was going down a rabbit hole of why we needed to be using the land to begin with. But so when we plow land, it actually releases carbon and it can erode away. The topsoil can just wash away. And that's what we see in cropping situations. When it rains, the topsoil isn't held in place with grass and roots. And so it can wash away really easily. Now, some people are using cover crops in between the corn, and that does make it better, but we still have to get nutrients into the soil. So even better than cover cropping would be, once you harvest that corn, to pull in an animal like a cow or another grazing animal that can eat down the rest of that cellulose, and which isn't digestible by really pigs or chickens. It's really ruminants that need to do that. And through their digestive system, they're breaking it down. They're leaving manure, which is fertilizing the soil. They're spreading out moisture, and they can actually help build carbon in the soil through a stronger root system.
And that's going to, over time, if we did that more and more, we could stop or reduce climate change.
It's a big factor in mitigating climate change. Yeah, I don't want to say that, cows are the only solution to climate change. There's a lot of things that need to happen. But blaming, cow farts or methane emissions from cows as, the main driver of climate change is really misguided, because the methane that they produce is actually part of a biogenic cycle, which is, I don't know if you can see this poster behind me, but we have that graphic on sacredcow.info. But that's showing basically that, cattle are breathing out the methane, but then that breaks into H2O, water, and CO2, carbon dioxide. The plants take up the carbon dioxide, they emit the O2, oxygen, and they suck in the carbon. The carbon either stays in the grass that the cow eats and becomes part of the carbon of the animal, or the carbon goes down through the roots to feed the bacteria that then mine the nutrients to feed the plant. And some of that gets sequestered in the soil. That's very, very different process from fossil fuels, which are extracting ancient locked carbon straight up into the atmosphere. That's a completely different cycle, and it's not a cycle at all. It's a one-way street. And so to compare cattle or any moose, some people are going around shooting moose because they emit too much methane, or suggesting that we need to clear the ocean floor of mussels because they are emitting methane, right? If we really want to eliminate all sources of methane, then we would get rid of any wetland. We would get rid of all rice production. There's different ways. What we really need to be doing is reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And unfortunately, our industrial ag system through cropping is largely reliant on fossil fuels, not just to run the tractors, but also for all the chemicals that they use to put nutrients in the fields that animals could easily do.
That's so crazy. And I think we've seen just in this last couple months, of that the emissions got so much better, but the cows didn't go anywhere, but just the cars were gone, or the factories were shut down or whatever.
Yeah. And it's also exposing a real weakness, which is, the fact that our meat supply is dominated by just a handful of companies. And so when there's a bottleneck in processing at these plants, because the workers are working in dangerous, cramped conditions, they're too close together, it's not super safe, they're highly stressed, all of those things, when there's a problem there, then everyone feels it, because now we're noticing that, you can only buy, 1 or 2 packages of meat at some grocery stores and things like that. Those of us who sell direct to customers like we do on our farm have never had a better year, because people are really paying attention to where their meat's coming from, wanting to support local farmers, really paying attention to their sourcing. And so it's just been phenomenal for us. And I think it's a really great time to be putting out a message like this, that grazing animals can be, really good for the planet, really healthy for us, and ethically, we go through it all in the book about how, we break down sentience, we break down, what does a diet of least harm look like? And all points lead to better meat.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there isn't a meat shortage if you just look local. And what do you tell people when they say they can't find meat where they live?
That they're not looking hard enough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's most places, you can always have it shipped to you. There's usually a local producer, so check out eatwild.com or localharvest.org, or, any of the resources that I have at sacredcow.info. And I'm sure you have a ton of resources for folks too, to be able to access better meat. So, price is a problem, but our food system is artificially too cheap. And so you can either pay now or pay later. And now that folks are sort of reassessing, trying to get hopefully healthier during this time, and not just, binging on junk food during this, it's time to really take a look, and in the back of the book, Rob and I have tips for people on how to live a more sustainable life overall. One of them is, not getting yourself into debt, and, putting some money away. We just got out of a really, blockbuster few years as far as the economy goes. And, if people spend all their money on, iPhones and not nutrition, then we're going to have a problem. The other is to just keep your body healthy, so you're not a burden on society, and to do your very best to, keep the oil changes going on your body, right? You don't expect oil changes just magically happen on your car. And I think a lot of us don't always think about our bodies as, really the only wealth we have.
Yes, really. And especially this last, I think we've had such a abundant market for so long, and then to have it come screeching to a halt. And I think it really woke a lot of people up that they need to be careful with their money and their health.
Definitely.
I know I've been careful with my health, but now I'm like, oh, I should be a little more careful with my money too. So what about this idea about feeding the world, that it can never eat, if we don't all eat lentils, then we're not going to feed the world?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at that. Right now, we actually make way too much food. So anyone that is hungry, it's a political problem and a food distribution problem. It's not a food production problem. We produce way more calories than we need, and we need to stop just focusing on the calories that we're producing and focus more on the nutrition. So protein is the most valuable thing that we can be growing. And I did go through the numbers in the United States, and we do have enough land. I go through it in my book to grass finish all the cattle that we currently have for in the US. Now, in other countries, I don't have the raw data in order to work on that. And it might make more sense in Peru, for example. We have some farm interns here that are from Peru. Guinea pigs are maybe a better animal protein source for them. If you don't have a refrigerator, you can't store a large animal like a cow. So, a one meal kind of thing might be better, or chicken, things like that. Camels and goats might work better in more arid areas. And so I really think that the solutions need to be regionally appropriate. But certainly grazing animals that are managed in a more efficient way is going to be healthier than, the U.S. sending foreign aid in the form of rice to countries, getting them dependent on free rice instead of building up their own local food economies.
Yes, and I mean the soy. I blame the soy for like ruining my health. So the soy is grown, and I think it messes up the agricultural output in so many places. It just messes up the soil and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, tell people. So, is this going to be like where are they going to be able to watch your movie at?
So we're working on distribution right now. We're still finishing production. We actually just recorded the voiceover with Nick Offerman. So that was last week. And so we're laying in all of that. And actually later today or tomorrow, I'm going to get to see it with actually his voice in there, which is really great. He's a huge advocate
from Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
The meat guy.
Yes. But he's actually a huge believer in regenerative ag, and is actually very good friends with the sheep farmer that we visit with in England, which is how he got on my radar. And we're working with a composer on the music, and we're still kind of finishing up the color and the sound and all that kind of stuff. So once that's done, we're going to go out to distributors and figure all that out. Film festivals really aren't happening right now, unfortunately. So it's kind of a funny time to be releasing a film. But I do want to try to make it available to folks that are early supporters. So right now I'm working on trying to figure out the technology to bring that to people that pre-order the book. Like I said, we are offering interviews with folks like Chris Masterjohn and Sarah Hallberg, things that didn't make it into the film, but they're still really amazing. We're giving away a meat cookbook, and Robb has a book called Flavor in No Time Flat, and we also have tons of discounts to better meat companies and all of that stuff. It's worth at least $200 is for anyone that pre-orders the book, and they just have to submit their receipt. So it's at sacredcow.info/book, and they can see how to submit their receipt. They can see how to share this with their friends. And we also have a ton of blog posts there on really all the questions, but the book has it all in one spot.
So how can people So do you recommend doing that or going on Amazon or?
So they can go on to Amazon or their favorite bookseller, pre-order the book, and then submit their receipt through our website in order to instantly get their bonuses.
The goodies.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any final words you want to say to anyone who's like thinking they're afraid to eat meat?
Yeah, actually, this morning, Rob and I just started recording a course that we're working on called Meat Curious. And it's for folks who are either recovering vegans and vegetarians or folks that are either, nervous about eating meat or want to feed their kids better meat or just, worried about the health and environmental and ethical sourcing of meat. And so it's basically a lot of the information from our book, but Rob and I are kind of guiding you through it. There's some bonus materials, videos of ex-vegans and vegetarians kind of talking about their experiences. And so that's going to be available also on the website as, for folks that want like an actual course to help walk them through and help them feel okay about eating meat again.
So if people want to like subscribe and follow you, where do they go?
So I'm on Instagram at Sustainable Dish, and I have 2 websites. My nutrition website is sustainabledish.com. And then all the meat stuff that we've been talking about today is at sacredcow.info.
Awesome. Well, guys, I've been watching Diana for a while, getting ready to make this book and this movie. And, also, how can people support you if they want to donate to your causes?
Yeah, that would be huge. We're working on an impact campaign right now. So I'm coming up with curriculum for schools. I want this film shown at all the schools that are showing Cowspiracy, which are a lot, including my son's high school. And so I'll be, again, working on materials for teachers. I'm going to be going to schools. And at sacredcow.info, we do have a take action tab and a donate tab. So people can learn how to support other organizations that are doing what I'm doing, or teaching farmers, or just want to help me out, getting the word out. This has sort of been my unpaid mission for the last little while. So I'll make a little money on the book, but really on the film, it's not about that. It's about just getting this information out there. Yeah. So it's all a nonprofit.
Well, you're doing an amazing job, Diana, and I hope that everybody will watch the movie and get the book. It's going to be really good, and I can't wait to see it all. And I've got my Kindle version, so I'll be you can see there, yeah. I'll be reading that over the next month or so. So thank you so much for doing this, Diana, and go and follow her at Sustainable Dish on Instagram and find out about all her work. And please like this video. Please share with a friend who needs to hear it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.